Welcome to Wednesdays with Willa. I am your host, Willa White, and this is my weekly podcast show that airs on Wednesday mornings at 10 a.m. Eastern on my Facebook page, Willa White Medium. It also goes out on my YouTube channel and the Lilydale Assembly Facebook page. And I encourage you to like and share and subscribe and follow and all those good things so that you can keep getting notification as to when I go live and the other events that I have for you. I think it's wonderful that I'm able to offer this to you each week. This is year 8 of Wednesdays with Willa. So you have a treasure trove of past episodes that you can enjoy watching. I would refer you to my YouTube channel for that because Facebook has changed how they handle live videos and storage. So please go to the YouTube channel, Willa White, and you can binge watch to your heart's content. Again, I've had great guests over the years, a lot of great education regarding spiritualism, mediumship, healing, faith, family, and more. And it's such a delight. And I do have a couple of announcements to make. I do have upcoming advanced student demonstrations that are online through Zoom and sponsored by the Church of the Living Spirit. These are advanced students that have worked really hard, and it's only $5 a ticket on March 27th and March 4th. You can find more information about that on my Facebook page so that you can get registered to join us for an afternoon of messages. They're gallery style, and it's very possible that you would receive a message from a wonderful student medium who has been practicing their craft, their art, their skill, but also to be of loving service to spirit. So I encourage you to jump on those opportunities from April 27th and May 4th. Those are 2 Sundays. And it also supports the Church of Living Spirit, which is a spiritualist church located in Lilydale, New York. All right, without further ado, I would like to introduce today my special guest, Rich Braconi. He's been on before, and I'm always thrilled to see him again. He's a wonderful medium, and he's going to be here in Lilydale this summer for the 2025 Lilydale Workshop Program. What's interesting about Rich Braconi is while he is a spirit medium, he's also a former undercover detective. And so he spent at least 27 years of his life being an undercover narcotic and criminal investigations detective. He also participated on the emergency response team, and he did all of that while owning and operating of his own martial arts club. So, I mean, here's a busy man, right? Well, about 15, 16, maybe years ago, Rich began developing his spiritual gifts and mediumship skills. And today he has demonstrated his work through spirit mediumship galleries for years. He's done workshops, done personal readings for folks. He also had his first book, Being More of God, a true story of spiritual evolution, and it did reach best-selling book status on Amazon. And he'll be here in Lilydale this summer for the 2025 summer season. He'll be here on July 5th, 6th, and 7th, teaching 3 different workshops. I actually think the 5th is an evening with him. He'll be doing spirit messages. Then on the 6th is spirit mediumship and communication with our spirit, which is a workshop, and the power of surrendering soul ownership and control over our life, which is something that is near and dear to his heart. I have linked these the tickets to this particular post, so you'll be able to click that and go ahead and get registered to attend in person here in Lilydale with Rich Braconi. So please welcome today onto the show, Rich. Thanks for being here today, Rich.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction. I'm gonna hire you as my manager in the future.
Will do. I can help you out, definitely.
And congratulations to you, 8 years.
Yeah, 8 years. It's gone by fast. It's just year 8 of it. And when they first said, "Hey, will you do podcast?" I said, "Absolutely not. I don't like being filmed, and I'm a private person." But they said, "Listen, you'll be fine. You're a natural. You'll be fine." And I said, "Fine. I will do this as long as I can have guests and interview them and have spiritual conversations, and as long as it's fun." And so far, all of those things have held true.
That's a
So
great,
yeah.
it's a great combination too. The fact that you put humor into things, and plus your wonderful smile and stuff. So I'm sure there's a big following that is in your future, even more so now.
Oh, thank
Yeah,
you, Rich. I
yeah,
appreciate that very much. And I know you've had your own following. I mean, we when we were chatting before, you did like 100 different gallery message services by yourself in 1 year alone, which is kind of nuts. Like energetically, it can be a lot to do. And I did mention how my students are going to be doing message. I mean, they'll be sharing a service. And I think it's something that when you can really work in that power with spirit, you can feel inspired to help people with these beautiful greetings from spirit.
yes,
And there are different ways that over the years you've developed as a medium, your own techniques, shall we say, but some that would be universal for most mediums. And I was hoping today that you could share with us some of those experience and also provide some tips for people who are wanting to detect spirit.
yeah, absolutely. What's a little bit different, Willa, than with my approach is that I'm self-taught, I'm self-learned. I didn't have any coaching. So it took me a while to gradually get to a point where um, there was a confidence in me to actually go public and to do, mediumship galleries and public events. Um, so everything that I've learned from myself, I would have to prove first, and I did it through just free readings for people. So I did free readings for years just to prove that this process that I was learning, this communication that only our spirit can receive, or the spiritual intelligence within us can receive, that I refined it or polished it to a point where, I could start doing public events. But one of the part of the process that I've learned that might be educational for people is in my prep before I would do a group gallery. Um, I truly have faith that this whole communication is based on love, the spiritual communication. And in that way, I would go and ask for loved ones that are in spirit connected to people that are in a gallery to share information. And I used to go through this process where I would say, can you start off with creating an image of me being able to see you next to a specific audience member that you're connected to? And then I would go into details about, once I see that image of you, can you share a name, either connected to the audience member or yourself? And then I would just slowly progress it into, can you then share with me how you passed away? And I would go into these choices where, if it was a medical passing, or if it was from an accident, or if it was from a suicide, or if it was from an overdose, or if it was murder. And I would then just slowly progress that conversation into also information that was connected to something that the audience member only would know. And I would go through this whole process every single time. And I felt like what was happening is that I was making a sincere gesture of love towards people in spirit to speak to me. I was using love, that sincere gesture of, I want to share messages to your loved ones sitting here. And I'm actually going to listen to anything that you have to say. I think that was helpful to me. It was really, really helpful to me. And then I felt like it really inspired people in spirit, because they saw or they sensed the sincerity in me because they're alive, that I want to communicate with this guy. And I slowly started growing it. So that was one tip that I think that people, they might want to try or add to their arsenal.
Yeah, I think that's a great one. It's an essential one. I actually teach my students that. And initially, you want to connect with that spirit light. that you know that that's your home base, is what I call that. So you can
Yeah.
always return to it. You build the energy from that space and invite spirit to lovingly attend and to share their essence with you. And
Correct.
the essence of them being not just their physical appearance or personality, but that depth of relationship that they have with a recipient or a sitter, so that there can really be a beautiful reunion, a beautiful healing. And as you said, that having that intention, practice, right practice and right intention are the two main ingredients necessary for mediumship. And intention really helps to inform practice. Right. So when you're in that space of, I know that I'm doing this for the highest and best good of myself and others, then all things unfold in that way. So beautiful. Yes. Very necessary.
It's great because I get confirmation from people such as you that I respect that you do the same exact thing. So it's great.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. And having that preparation, when you've settled yourself out, and then you have that invitation to blend. And then when it comes to public mediumship, you're in this kind of quiet zone of invitation. I often feel like little butterflies in my tummy. And I know that that's like spirit beginning to stir and awaken things.
Right. Correct.
I'm strongly clairsentient. And it's really beautiful that I can feel that start to happen. And then usually when whoever introduces me as the chairperson of the event, I'll step into it and I can feel I'm standing in the power fully. And it's like ignite. And
Yes.
it
Yeah.
happens that way. But preparation is a true key. So yes, thank you. And then what do you do next, Rich?
Yeah. Another tip, right? Another tip. I always looked at in the very beginning, my viewpoint was I was learning to return to a flow of information that only our spirit can receive and interpret. So I always looked at it as like returning to a coexistence or a partnership, like a spiritual partnership, whether it be with higher wisdom or people in spirit. There's a partnership there. And again, it's based on love. And assertively, I approached this partnership, this conversation, where I didn't want to minimize it, of what information I could produce. So assertively, I always push this communication to grow. And I think that was an important part of me watching to get information on a level that I never expected. So specific dates, like months, days, and years of people passing, or someone being born, first names and last names, a specific death, kind of death, but not just what happened, but the exact location in the exact month, in the exact surroundings that it all happened. Details about things that have happened in their life that only the person alive would know, like specific details. In addition, what started happening was as things started progressing, I would ask for something that they currently did within the last day or two that only they would know. Like they didn't put it on Facebook. It was just something that occurred. And it could be something as simple as, they saw a mouse inside of their house that nobody knew about, or the refrigerator broke, or they opened up the refrigerator and they found an expired, milk inside the refrigerator. And it's not something they would share,
Sure.
but it's something that spirit said, here's what happened yesterday. You opened the refrigerator up and you saw that the milk was expired. And they were like, how do you know that? So it's that. And then I noticed that when I didn't minimize it, there was messages that people in the audience would have to give to friends of theirs. And it was something, and I learned this. It had to do with a spiritual need.
Mm.
I never wanted to, this is something I wanted to focus on, but never underestimate the power of a strong spiritual need to share a loving message. And very often, people in spirit would bring someone else in. And the person I was talking to, I would say, look, this isn't for you. This is a friend of yours. For instance, this is a true story. I said, there's a woman who's saying her name is Carol. I said, currently, she lived in a state about 2 states away from your friend whose name is Mary Ann. And she says, yes, Mary Ann's mother passed away and her name was Carol and she lived 2 states away. She wants to thank Mary Ann for moving her body to be buried in her original state where Mary Ann currently lives and she was born. And she says, oh my God, Mary Ann just called me yesterday and said she's moving her mother's body to her state to be buried there. Now, that was a message that I never in a million years thought that we could give. But being assertive and don't minimize the amount of information we can get, I think is an important tip for people.
Oh, yeah, I think that's great. And,
Yeah.
and I just, let's go deeper into that. When you're assertive, it's
Yes.
different from a demand. It is a
Yeah.
request still.
Yes.
But tell us a little bit more, because I think we need to parse that out a little bit, the assertive part.
Yeah. One of the things I learned is that, for instance, you can put yourself into a state of peace. Everybody does it. It's something I'm going to be teaching at my class, learning how to surrender soul control over our life. You put yourself in a state of peace. A lot of times in the beginning, you do it for a couple minutes and then you start thinking again. And over time, you learn to hold on to that state of peace for longer and long periods of time. You're seeing a growth of your spiritual will. That's the strength of your spirit. The longer you can hold on to that peace. And so when you first have this resistance of going back to thinking, you have to learn to be assertive. So you have faith in this process. And now you're going to be assertive and get it back. You're not being angry. You're not being demanding. You're just showing an assertiveness towards it's a stronger faith in going, I'm doing the loving thing. I'm returning to my spiritual state of peace and I want to hold on to it. And so I had to learn how to become assertive in that way. So not assertive against people, but assertive in the process that has to do with showing a self-love for ourselves, which is a state of spiritual peace. And then I noticed that there was another step, which is persistence. I had to do it multiple times a day. And then I learned that there was a courage. And then I learned there was a passion to it all. So I think these are all different stages about the strength of your spiritual will.
Yeah, I love that. I love that description of it, because it does have to flow in those particular ways. There's a trust that you have in yourself and in spirit.
Yes.
That you are going to be able to access those kinds of information. When you say, of course I will. Of course I can get that information. Of course.
Yeah.
But if we engage our analytical mind, then of course we can't.
Correct.
It shows you all the different holes in your theory. It shows you all the different problems that could persist. The ego roadblocks, we're here, there, and everywhere.
Yes.
And if we just say, of course I can do this.
Yes.
But there has to be, as you said, that consistency. So having right practice means that you don't just say, oh, I'm going to be a medium today. that you realize that there is an effort of discipline that is put toward that you say, okay, this is how I need to train up my energy and mind, body, spirit, calibrate myself to do this work so I can attune more fully to what spirit is sharing and be a true open channel to that, and still hold me and what's mine, of course. But yeah, I love that you sequenced us through that there's the sincerity of intention, but it is assertive with yourself.
Yes.
It's assertive with yourself. That's a huge component for anybody who's wanting to detect spirit.
Oh, yeah.
Be a medium. Love it, love it, love it. That's a super one. And having that passion and knowing that communication with spirit is a sacred joy.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And when we're in that state of being, it comes very easily. It's almost effortless. I'll
Yes.
say almost, because there usually is a lot of energy you have to expend as a medium to do this work.
Correct.
It's not like just sitting and talking with a person. There's a lot to it. That's, your body's getting pinged and dinged. You're trying to pay attention as best you can to the messages and how to convey them lovingly to a person as they're, and hold the space for them as they're receiving it. So yeah. Whew. What else should we share with them? Is that
um, there's, first of all, I want to compliment your students, or anyone, not just your students, but anyone who's looking to put themselves in front of a public stage. I want to compliment people for doing that.
yes.
There was a concept that I held on to when I first was being inspired to do this, going back, in the beginning. And the concept was, I'm not doing this for me. I'm doing this as an education to prove that spirit exists, that God exists, that a higher power exists. That if spiritual inspiration, which is different than mental thinking, so it's two different forms of guidance. So the guidance we get from our mental thinking has a separate life path than the guidance we receive through spiritual inspiration. So when we get inspired and recognizing what it means to be inspired, so that's a whole nother subject, but when we get inspired, I always looked at it was like spirit or God was saying, Rich, I want you to make this choice. Mm-hmm. There's a path in life that I've destined for you or predestined for you that's going to work out. If you show faith in the partnership that we have together, watch what I have planned for you. And so that's how I looked at it. Yeah. I also expected that when I first started doing public events, that everything wasn't going to go completely smooth. But was the overall experience something that would help me better understand that this truly exists, this communication? And then my job is to have faith in it. So when people first do it, don't always go into it as, here's how I want it all to turn out. You want to go into it as, this is a progression, and this is the first stage of that progression of me getting better and better and better and better. So always look at it as you're setting a stage for personal growth. So the very first event I did, that's how I looked at it. I looked at it like, it's not about win or fail. It's about me demonstrating that if I'm being inspired to do this, do I have the faith? Am I going to show a sincere gesture of love towards spirit and go, this is what I'm supposed to do? Mm-hmm. And overall, the event worked out absolutely great. There was some hiccups in it, and I said, I expect it. So I think that's important for people to know that it's a gradual process. But as long as you see these moments where you're so in tune and it's healing people's lives, there's nothing but progression ahead of you.
Yes. Oh, that's excellent. Excellent, Rich, because it is, it's so nerve-wracking because you think, well, I want to be as good as I possibly can for everyone, but you still have to maintain that you are human and that you're learning, and that mediumship development also has spiritual unfoldment wrapped up in that, and that we have to learn how to handle our own disappointments or the disappointments of others, and learn how to get up from that, get back on the horse, as it were. Even if you're like, well, oh, that was a bit of a bomb, that you don't take it personally. You learn from it.
Yes.
And then be back into that space with spirit.
Correct.
And return to that truth constantly.
Correct.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you were able to do that, and kind of being a public demonstration medium is very different from private reading, right? Yes. There's a different component of energy when you have a group in front of you, and you can kind of what I call surf the wave that a group creates. And In a private reading, you're very much in that little bubble with someone.
Yes.
You're in that little bubble. So there are different components of being of loving service. There could be such a beautiful counseling that happens in a private session that you can't really do in a public. But yeah, there's so many wonderful things that you learned in that journey of doing so many public demonstrations.
Yes. Yeah.
And putting yourself into the, well, I guess we'll just see what happens today.
Yes. 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 And that's a big part of learning how to surrender soul control over your life.
Yes.
Is you get away from mental resistance that talks you out of it. You get to see your true potential when you're in this partnership or coexistence. And so very often, and that's another tip that if I could offer people, is expect mental resistance and learn from it. Meaning that whatever you're thinking is trying to talk you out of, 99 times out of 100, if not 100 times out of 100, it's trying to talk you out of an opportunity that you're going to succeed at. So that's your mental resistance. So very often when you first started going into mediumship, there was a mental fear that it was a tactic I used. I looked at it as a tactic that my brain was saying, Rich, you can't do mediumship in front of a group. It's not going to work out. Mm-hmm. And it created a fear, and it asked me to believe in that fear. And I said, I'm not going to believe in your fear. I'm going to trust what spirit is inspiring me to do. And so it was a choice that I needed to make. And I realized that if I gave into my mental fear, all that I accomplished over the next 15 years, it would never have been a reality in my life. I would never have seen all the healing, not only to myself, which has been great, but the healing to all the other people. If I would have gave in to that first moment 15 years ago of my mental brain using the tactic of fear to try to talk me out of something spiritually I was being inspired to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is a frequent, it's not if a medium that is developing is going to experience it, it's just when.
Yeah.
And you knowing that everybody has to go through it. It's one of those things you can't go around. You have to walk up to the lion, so to speak, and say, I have such deep trust that spirit is going to catch me and hold me and bring through beautiful messages of love and healing. Correct. That the other things the other little yammering voices don't get your true attention, and that you let them be just fall away from you like illusions that they are.
Correct.
Yeah. There's a beauty to that, to giving over. Don't you find that there's a beauty when you serve and you're just completely in the moment of now and you can't imagine being anywhere else?
No. And that's the point of recognizing you've completely surrendered soul ownership over your life. When you reach that point, you no longer are trying to control life. Mm-hmm. When that happens, you no longer think. Anytime you give up soul control or soul ownership over your life, you're going to reach a state of peace. And you're going to develop that state of peace to a state of quietness and a state of stillness. And then there's going to be an awakening of this flow of knowledge that's based on spiritual inspiration. You never want to leave it. One of the other tips that I've learned that I can offer people is you're not supposed to leave it. That very often we do readings and then we go back to our regular life and we start thinking all the time. When we know that in our readings, in order to get the highest possible answers, the most accurate, the most effective solutions and answers and guidance, we have to quiet our brains so that there's a harmony between our spiritual intelligence and our mental intelligence. We create a harmony. And then when we get into that harmony, we enjoy all the rewards when we do readings and all this great information that we say isn't ours that comes through inspiration. We leave the readings and we go back to a life where we're thinking all the time and we listen to just those answers. And very often it leads to personal suffering or it leads to unwise choices or more controlling way of life. So that would be a tip that I've learned from myself, that we were never supposed to go back to that. We're supposed to grow the ability to stay in that into that flow of inspiration 24/7. And that's what I've learned. It's hard for me to think on my own anymore. I have to really focus on trying to think. I don't know how to do it. But it took time for me to shift or transform into that state all the time and recognize it assertively as this is supposed to be our native state.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know, Andrew Jackson Davis talked about superconsciousness.
Yes.
And that he was able to maintain that particular state, consciousness, more and more until that it was exclusive. And I think it's an important distinction for our viewers today that Rich is not advocating that you be open for spirit contact from other people's loved ones 24/7. I just want to make sure you guys know that it has more to do about intuitive living of your own life in those moments so that you can be in the flow and have your own connections deeply with the people that are in your own immediate life and feel completely in the hands of the divine and listening to that in those relationships and those situations.
Yeah, it's great that you brought that up. So thank you. So let me just add on to it and clarify this. When you go back to your regular life, it's not about talking to people in spirits. It's about now shifting your awareness away from people in spirit to a higher wisdom, to a God voice. I call it a God voice or higher wisdom or spirit's voice.
Yes.
That voice, when you shift to your regular life, is all about advancing you. It's all about making wise choices for yourself, learning how to choose who you're supposed to share your life with and who you're not, what profession you're supposed to lead yourself into, what opportunities or experiences that are coming your way that you're supposed to accept that's going to create the highest possible loving experiences for yourself or not. It's also going to keep you in a state of peace all the time, which is a great source of inspiration for your children or people around you to see you walking around in that state of peace. You're going to open yourself up to just more and more moments of being enlightened with an education that's based on unconditional love. So that's just to clarify. When I go back to my personal life, it's all about that. It's about growing me and focusing all the attention on developing my own life.
Yeah, beautifully stated. And because we do have to listen ultimately to that inner guide.
Yes.
That inner guide, that spark of the divine that's in each person that will guide them true.
Yes.
in their lives and in their circumstances. So that when, as sensitive, so often people get into that place. Well, I'm a sensitive. I don't like when I don't feel comfortable. I want to control my environment and the people around me.
Yes.
Because I feel safest when that happens. But, I believe what Rich is trying to share is that we're able to bring that peace so that we don't get into triggering modes and be reacting aggressively, emotionally in those spaces, that we're looking for that which is the spiritual response to the occasion and really holding ourselves more accountable to those things than that knee-jerk reaction that might be so tempting, that keeps us in our little comfort zone of things. That our peace has to come from within and not necessarily what's happening in the external environment.
Correct.
Yes. Yeah. I'm so glad that you're teaching more and more about those things. I know it's going to be another great workshop that you do here at Lilydale.
Thank you. Thank you.
Last summer you were doing along those lines, and I'm glad you'll be taking people further on that particular aspect of their journey. And it's such a great tip for detecting your own spirit, your own soul. It's important to have a baseline of what's you and how you want to bring the spiritual ideas and concepts out of theory and into deeper practice in your own life. So
very much so.
Great, Rich. What else would you want to share with us about detecting spirit?
I have a story. Do you want to hear a story?
I love stories.
So true story. Being self-taught and self-learned, I was inspired in the very beginning to expand just not what I was picking up, but to have different experiences and to see if I could talk to people in spirit at different locations. So I was inspired to get connected to a paranormal group and see if they would be open to having a spirit medium as part of their group. And I would then go out to different locations that were, quote, haunted, or there was high spiritual activity there. And I would serve the group in such a way where I could talk to the people in spirit to find out why they were actually there, who they were. And so it was so many great experiences, and I did this for years. And there was one particular location where there was a lady in a house who recently took in someone who was renting a room from her about 6 months ago. And she did it just to offset the expenses. So she was elderly. She was probably in her 70s. He was roughly probably in his 40s. And they contacted the group because of all the increased spiritual activity that has been occurring. So things were moving. They could hear voices. Particularly, he was saying that he would wake up in the middle of the night with all kinds of bad dreams. He felt like a spiritual presence was on him all the time. It was changing his emotions. He started having anger. He started feeling upset. His health was getting really, really poor. And so he felt like there was some kind of connection to someone in spirit, like purposely trying to harm him. And so after about an hour of being inside of the residence, I felt inspired to go up into the attic. And inside of the attic, I was sitting there with a couple people, and I started getting connected to a woman spirit. And the woman spirit shared that she was murdered. And she gave me a name, and she talked about her murder took place in Philadelphia at a hotel, and implemented the guy downstairs as being part of the group of people that committed the murder and also her rape. And so she started sharing more and more details, and everybody's recording the conversation. So now, when we were all said and done, she was taking a responsibility for being still earthbound and making him feel the pain that him and the group put on her near the end of her life, or right before her life ending. And so when we were all done, we moved downstairs to the living room, and we called in like a group meeting of the lady and also the gentleman, the guy that was there. And so the kind of detective inside of me started a conversation with the man, and I told him my background in law enforcement. I said, you're kind of familiar to me in some way. I said, is there some way that through a law enforcement standard that I would know you? And I was kind of just poking around to see how he would respond to the whole thing. And he kind of sunk his head down, and he started getting a little emotional, and then he picked his head up and he said, well, maybe you heard about me. And I was with two other people, and we were arrested for the murder of a woman at a hotel lobby in Philadelphia. And then he immediately started saying how he didn't participate in the woman's rape or the woman's murder, but he was present. And he went to jail for a whole bunch of years and recently got out like 6 months ago. And this woman took him in not knowing this about him. And so I asked him, I said, what is the name of the woman that was involved in the murder connected to you and your group? And he gave me the same name the woman gave me up in the attic when she identified herself. So here is this woman who was still earthbound. She hasn't crossed over. And the pain that she suffered in life she was now around him, and it was affecting him to this day. So what I did was I eventually talked to the person in spirit, and guided them away from this unloving action and told her there was a better life. I had this conversation with her. And so we followed it up like about a week later, and they said it's like non-existent. Like he doesn't feel that way anymore. There's not things moving around the house anymore. So it's a true story.
Wow. Wow. So there was a healing that came from that.
Yeah.
And there can also be an energy residue, I guess you could say, an energy residue that people pick up on when they're detecting things in homes and buildings, but also what people bring with them. We're kind of like snails that leave a little glistening trail of energy wherever we go. And energy doesn't lie. People can, but energy doesn't.
Correct.
And so it can be one of those things where energetically he needed to move past that.
Yes.
In a big way. And I'm glad that you were able to facilitate that healing. And I just as a point of clarity, did you feel that she was visiting, not necessarily, I guess earthbound is not the term I would have used. I guess visiting because she felt that things had not been resolved. And it's not really necessarily that she's chained to the earth world and she can't cross per se, but that there were these things that she needed to resolve and he needed to resolve, because there are those instances where they're not really chained in one location and can't move, as demonstrated by what your experience was, that she hadn't been located in that house.
Yeah. Again, my viewpoint is this, again, just learning from all of this. Mm-hmm. There's moments where, and I've been told this a lot by people, where you have a loved one and they are right on the verge of crossing over, whether it be a disease or whatever the case may be. Mm-hmm. And very often they feel a bond to this way of life that they feel like that people can't go on without them. And it's like the will of your spirit that clings on to a life that they just don't want to leave. And very often family members will tell them, look, everything is going to be okay. Just let go. Mm-hmm. Learn how to surrender control.
Yes.
And that's what I notice about people that are earthbound. There's some kind of willfulness, spiritual will, that they exhibit towards something either they feel that they should do before they cross over, that kind of keeps them here for a little bit. Mm-hmm. And sometimes because they don't know time, there's no time on the other side. It's like one big moment. They can be here 2 months of us, but it doesn't seem like it's that kind of time to them. So that's my perception of it all. Once they let go of trying to control something here, or a retribution, or even if you're suddenly murdered and all of a sudden you feel this drive inside of you want to tell your loved ones who did it, like you because you feel they might be in danger. I've seen spirits do that too, where they just they have the willfulness to stay here because there's something that they sense that is driving them to do before they cross over. But they all reach a point where they start to surrender control over their life. And that's when we let go and we ascend. Yeah. So it might be a little bit different than how you see it.
Yes. Because in terms of this, they can bring their attention, they can visit, they can try to share their thoughts and feelings with those here on the earth plane. But we have to think of things in a multidimensional way, that just because we're thinking in terms of heaven or hell being up or down, that it's really a state of consciousness that people are in.
Yeah.
And that they can visit in around us, and they aren't necessarily bound by time and space the way we think or perceive that we are. And that often people are just visiting. They're not necessarily loitering as much as people would assume, because it's not sustainable. Usually their kind of communication is very here 1 minute and gone the next.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that is because they're not able to necessarily hold here, even if they would want to. But someone has a question: if there's no time on the other side, do they see us as aging?
Oh, yes. They see our physical body as aging. So it's a
Yeah.
great thing when you say, what's your definition of us? Like, who are we?
Yeah.
And I say within our human creation, there's a physical side and a spiritual side. So there's a spiritual presence. So they see our body as aging, but not our spirit.
But not our spirit. And I've had spirit communicators come forward before, and I'll be in the middle of doing a message or a reading with someone, and all of a sudden I look at them and they look different. All of a sudden I'm seeing the younger version of themselves, exactly what their hair was, everything, because the person in spirit, that's how they remember them.
Yeah.
And so it's transfigures over them.
Yeah.
Briefly. And I'll say, well, they're telling me, yeah, that's exactly right. This is what they'll say. And that makes sense because that's how old I was when they passed.
Right.
So they can see us, but they can also have the memories of what it was like for us. And, I think it'd be great if you could share with us the way you perceive spirit, your particular soul senses, because we have the different clairs. Do you have ones that you would consider to be your dominant ways of sensing spirit?
I always, again, I have a different education about a lot of this. So the abilities that we all have, right, is the ability to be aware.
Mm-hmm.
We have the ability of being inspired. We have the ability of knowing. And so spiritual knowing is different. Like when we say that we spiritually know answers, that's different than answers that we mentally believe are true. It's two different, right? It's two
different. That would
different.
be claircognizance. When you just know, you just get a download from spirit.
Okay.
Yes.
So that's what I focus on. I focus on just what the abilities of my spirit is. And then I learn that there's a process that if I make myself aware of people in spirit, I get a response back from them through spiritual inspiration. Once I get inspired, my spirit says, oh, I know what they're saying. So it comes across as I know.
And the I know would be claircognizance. So that would be your dominant. That's your dominant.
So I look at it as a process where all those abilities are tied into the same process. It's me being, so when I did medical intuition for people, I would just be aware. I would shift my awareness towards medical imbalances inside of the human body.
Right.
And then in response to that, I would get inspired by their spirit. And my spirit then said, oh, I know what you're talking about. There's a heart murmur. There's a lung problem. There's this. So it's wherever I shift my awareness. If I want to talk to spirit or higher wisdom or God, I just shift my awareness towards that.
Yes. Yeah. And it's as if you have X-ray vision, as it were, X-ray knowing of what's going on around you. It's like Superman. Yeah. And someone has a question: how do I know if a spirit is trying to contact me?
Oh, so you want to know the difference between answers that you mentally think are true and answers that you're spiritually inspired with, and so that is true. So in the process, the first thing you'll say to yourself, does it serve a loving purpose? Because very often your thinking won't serve a loving purpose. It'll be controlling. It'll deliver your words in angry ways. And so you want to say, does it serve a loving purpose? The second thing, you'll touch here. Does it resonate within you here? That's different than if you touch your head when you're thinking. So if you touch here, your heart area, you'll say it resonates within me here. Yes. Do you sense that it's speaking the truth to you? If your response is yes, that's how you know also. That's another step that you know. So those are just three steps. Yes. The last one, just to throw it in there, but there's a couple more, is that once you receive it, if your brain tries to talk you out of that was spirit, that's how you know it was spirit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think what helps is if you can kind of scientifically rule out certain things. So, like if a client says the curtain moved, I'll say, was the window open? Like we do have to be reasonable from those standpoints, but nothing trumps personal experience. So, you can be having an experience and someone else is not experiencing it because they're not in that open state to receive from a particular spirit communicator at that time. So you may all of a sudden smell them, a smell associated with them. You may just all of a sudden hear their voice in your head on stereo because they're commenting about something. And you weren't even thinking about them at that moment. And all of a sudden they just stepped in the room and struck up the conversation. And so those kinds of beautiful things. And there's so many signs that come uniquely to people. But I see another quick question, if you don't mind, Rich. There's, is there a certain amount of time, before a spirit could reach out and communicate with family or a medium after passing? And I have my answer for that, but what would you like to say, Rich?
Oh no, I want to hear your answer, and then I'll give you mine.
Well, some spirits can reach out immediately and connect easily. It depends on the individual and spirit. Some of it's about life review, but sometimes it's about the grief process that the client is in. And sometimes people will say, well, how long before you think I should have a reading after a person has passed? And I found that 6 months is a great time frame because people are able to get through some of their deep grief and not be in a needy space, and it can be very empowering for them, and also gives the folks in spirit time to learn the ropes if this was not their thing, and be able to progress and understand a little bit farther in their own life review, because life review for some is easy peasy. And for others, they're slogging through mud, and we got to give time for those things. But I've had people show up the very next day or within hours, or it just depends. But we don't like to guarantee that they'll be able to present effectively. Mediums, when they come through and that have passed over, awesome communicators, very, very. They've done the training here on this earth plane side, and easy peasy once they get to spirit. It's been amazing. What would you like to say, Rich?
I'm agreeing with you. I always share with people about what I've experienced for myself, and I've experienced people passing within a day and being able to communicate with them. I've experienced where I was doing a reading for a woman, and I started talking to her mother, and she says, my mother's still alive. And I said, that's not true. And she said, what are you talking about? It's not true. I said, she's showing me that her body is in a hospital bed with all kinds of ventilations and connected to her. And she's above the body saying she's never going back to that body. And she says, Rich, that's exactly why I'm here. My mother's in a hospital with ventilation, and we feel that we have to make a choice. And I said, you're not going to have to make a choice. She's telling me that she's going to leave very, very shortly. She wants you to know how much she loves you and that she knows everything that you're going through, and she's going to leave before you have to make that choice. And she went back to the hospital, and her mother passed within an hour of her going back to the hospital. So she was there within an hour. I mean, so, and there's other stories too, where people in spirit have passed a very short time, like within hours, and I was able to communicate with them.
Yeah. So it can happen. You just can't guarantee that it's going to happen. And it is possible to connect with people who are about to pass or are in an altered state, perhaps from a coma, Alzheimer's, dementia, even people with autism. It can be easy to communicate with those people because you're connecting with their soul. You're not trying to speak to their conscious self. You're speaking to their soul. And so that's where that can come into play. So great example, Rich. And does grief block spirit awareness or increase the awareness?
You first.
Well, I've noticed that with clients, especially, sometimes their deep grief is they can be so upset that someone could be knocking on the door, ringing the doorbell, and they can't hear it, or they want it in a particular way. Anytime someone's in that very fragile but angry state, it's not easy for them to connect. When you're in a joyful, centered place, so much easier to connect with spirit, because you're not in this, why has this happened to me, or this is too difficult, or someone can come into your aura, but because you have the pain about it, it's like it's too jarring, and you start crying as soon as their presence is felt. And sometimes people were like, "Oh, I'm sorry," you're like, "I didn't mean to make you cry." It depends on the individual and spirit, but usually they're doing their best to comfort those here on the earth plane. It's just our awareness, if we are too underneath the fog, shall we say, of other things, and feeling hypersensitive, it could be very, very difficult for folks. What would you like to say, Rich?
So the question is about, is the medium, if they're undergoing grief, is that what they're talking about? The medium being able to read?
I think it's an individual, just not a medium, but a person who is, let's say a client. Does grief block spirit awareness or increase the awareness, was the question. And in my opinion, it does. It can very much block awareness.
So my experience is, my viewpoint has changed. So I don't experience like the way I used to experience grief. I used to have that response. It's much, much, much less. It's like minimal, because my viewpoint is more of a spiritual one and a perspective. So when people say that you've crossed over, or say somebody's passed away, I look at it as their body's passed away, this viewpoint, and they're now back to an amazing place that we all started from. And so I see them very much alive. So when people say, somebody's died, my viewpoint immediately goes, no, they're fine. But I know they're talking about their physical body has passed away. So in that viewpoint, it empowers me, where I can more see the truth that I just know to be, or I have a strong faith in. And so I won't experience somebody's grief. In a nutshell, I'll say, I can't wait to tell you how well they are. So I can actually get empowered. I can't wait to talk to the person in spirit.
Sure.
Yeah.
Because it helps to know what we know and believe what we believe, because it does alter our understandings. So, I'm not saying that those who are spiritualists or those who are mediums don't grieve. It's just a different way of handling things.
Yeah.
And it's not usually the heavy grief. And many times people are not just grieving for the person passing, but also the habit of them.
Yeah.
The what was it like to connect with them, or if they every day so used to connecting with an individual, and it's completely upset their entire life for this to have happened. There are a lot of things that they are having to process during that time. And so that's why I encourage people to hold off a little bit and work through some of these things so that you can have a more effective communication. Oh my gosh, time's going so fast. Is it easier to link with someone who has previously had an NDE, near-death experience? Sometimes, although it's interesting for me with a spirit communicator, if they've had a near-death experience, I'll say, okay, and your dad's telling me that he had passed before and came back.
Right.
And that shook him up enough to kind of get some things in order. So now he's passed over. Yeah, that happened. Or else I'll be like, okay, they toe dipped a lot on the other side and they didn't learn anything from it. So you know what I'm talking about. There are those people that's like,
I like your term, toe dip.
Yeah, because that's what happens. They're just kind of toe dipping, and then it's not like they say, oh, I want to live a better life. They just keep doing what they're doing. They're Zippo. We all know those people, right, Rich?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, so cool. I know time's going so fast. Any last tip that you'd like to share with folks about detecting spirit?
the very, very last tip. I think more than anything is all the things that I've learned about this communication. There's the wisdom in it. And here's what I mean by that is in order to get to this communication, I had to learn a process of quieting my brain to get into a state of peace and quietness and stillness. What I was enlightened to understand is that it was the will of my spirit, the strength of my spirit, my spiritual will, that had the power to do that. Had the power to say, I want you to quiet down because we're about to create a shift. And there was a wisdom in that I grew. So I started now contemplating, well, what does that mean, a will of your spirit? You know, what kind of strength is that? That's different than my mental strength or my physical strength. So within all our personal experiences that we have, always contemplate them, because there's some kind of wisdom, whether it's about love or it's about free will or it's about the will of your spirit, the strength of your spirit. It's in there. And you just have to take a moment to contemplate what you just experienced in order to extract that wisdom. So it was something I've done since I started doing all this.
Oh, I love that. Extracting the wisdom,
Yeah.
What a great phrase.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we have to rest into that experience and go, wow,
Yes.
look what I just learned about myself.
Yes.
Look what I just learned about the spiritual journey and how it's unfolding for myself and for others.
Yes.
And resting in that space of wisdom, you say, I don't really have anything to fear.
Yes.
Right? So there's a freedom from not having to be afraid about these things that actually opens us up to detect spirit communicators around us, but also the other souls that we're sharing this life with in the living pattern as well.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So there's a lot that is brought to the table when we're detecting mediumship and spirit. And just before we close out, I'll just remind people that if you're wanting to know, because there was a question about it, if you're wanting to know and be alerted as to when I go live, then you'll want to follow me on Facebook. So because that's the best notification. I'm always here on Wednesday mornings at 10 a.m. Eastern for another great show. So please join me next week. I'll have I think it's Dr. Christopher Kerr on. He is a hospice doctor and CEO and COO, I think, also of hospice palliative care in Buffalo. He and his research team have done amazing research about end of life visions, and he'll be back on the show to talk about that. He's also one of our highlights for the Lilydale summer season. He's always great to talk with. And definitely people say set an alarm every Wednesday for 9:45 a.m. That's what you need to do so that you can join me live, but you can always catch it on the replay. And please join us this summer for when Rich is here in July. As I said, it's linked in this post description. So all you have to do is click that little link to get tickets to attend Rich's workshops. He's obviously a wonderful person, but also he'll bring a lot of great inspiration and insight to you this summer. So please join us in person and enjoy Rich literally in the flesh instead of just online, and be part of the joy that is the summer of Lilydale. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Thank you, Rich, for sharing your wisdom and extracting so many great tips of this detecting spirit. We thank you so much.
It was an honor. Thank you for having me.
Oh, absolutely. All right, everyone. Bye-bye.